Hi guys, thanks for coming. So we have a panel on monetization. So again, my name is Heather. I'm from Millennial Media. We're a data and advertising platform. So we help developers monetize through advertising. We have a panel put together with gaming developers that have different strategies, and we're going to talk about those different strategies today. So what I'd like to do is have the panel introduce themselves, their company, and then maybe discuss at a high level your current monetization strategies. So, Lou, you want to start off?
I'm Lou Fasulo, CEO of Z2. We're a Seattle-based free-to-play mobile game publisher. We've been around since we started in 2008 and published our first game toward the end of 2009. Battle Nations, Trade Nations, and Metal Storm are kind of our key franchises. Been played by almost 70 million people. And we have some ads in some of them, but for the most part, it's in-app purchases. Go ahead.
My name is George Donovan. I'm the founder and CEO of Goji Games. We've been around a little longer than some of these guys have, but a lot less revenue. 2006 was our start date. We've shipped about 75 titles. On mobile, we've shipped about 24. We made a major investment into free play last year. We just started shipping products in the last quarter, so we've got 2 that just went out the door. So we're learning similar to what you and the audience are, but we've had a lot of experience monetizing from premium and in-app, as well as some ad pieces, so we bring a little more to the table.
Hi, my name's Joe Lazarus. I work at Backflip Studios. We are a mobile exclusive game studio. Been around for about 4 years. We have 300 million downloads, 30 million monthly uniques. That's spread across about 15 to 20 titles, both on kind of the ultra casual side, games like Paper Toss, Ninjump, Strike Night, as well as slightly more immersive, higher yield games like Dragon Veil, Army of Darkness Defense, and others. My role at Backflip is I'm in charge of basically the business teams, so oversee marketing, analytics, revenue operations, our ad systems, and other bean counter kind of stuff.
Hi everybody, Andy Kleinman from Scopely. Basically what we do is the company started as identifying a lot of the struggles that developers have on mobile and thinking about how mobile has evolved from social and console into how these games work, how they monetize, how they become successful. And we sort of built a company that it's a combination of technology, a platform, know-how, and sort of like free-to-play know-how, monetization know-how to help developers be successful. So we partner with developers in different stages of their development of a game, and we sort of help them through development cycles. We publish the game. We help with live operations, so everything is published under Scopely. We've launched 4 games so far. All of them have been top 5 games on iOS, and every game has been bigger than the last one. Our last game was Mini Golf Matchup, which we launched developed with a company called Rocket Jump in New Zealand. The game was #1 in 49 countries in the first day. It had 10 million downloads in the first month. And we sort of, part of how we help is both helping with monetization of in-app purchases as well as advertising. I run a business. I'm the chief business officer there. And also before Scopely, I was at Zynga, working on the international BD. Before that at Playdom. So I've been sort of through a lot of the cycles on how the game business has been evolving over the last few years and trying to take it one step further with Scopely.
Nice, perfect, thank you. So let's talk about the percentage of revenue dollars that you guys see from in-app purchases versus ad-supported. If there's a large gap there, are you trying to even out that gap, or are you fine putting more in one area than the other? So anyone can chime in.
So for us, it's actually 50-50, and by design, when we thought about this company, first of all, we're not limited to a certain genre. So there are games that depends by game. Some games are going to be more about in-app purchases and monetizing users, and some of them are not. What we thought always is we want to, by empowering all these great developers to build games, we want to build a huge network. We want to be, a lot of articles came out about Scopely saying that we want to be the HBO of mobile games, because we want to, in a way, we want to put out the best, 8 to 12 products every year that come out, and some of them, and it's not about how they monetize, it's about how we can build engagement and how can we build a network with quality products. So a big upside of when we talk to developers that want to work with us is because we monetize non-paying users so well. So most developers who are stuck just thinking about how to monetize users, they don't really think about, they think about advertising as a secondary thing, and they don't really realize that there's a lot of money to be made, especially when you're leaving, you're not monetizing 90 or 95% of your users. So we put a lot of emphasis on that, and it's paying off significantly for us.
Okay. So Joe, you said a lot of your revenue was based on in-app purchases. Do you guys ever, what is your overall strategy with that? Do you ever, with a lot of it being in-app purchases and you doing a lot of cross promotions, what is the thought there? We were talking about it earlier as far as possibly bringing in some ad-supported, but what's the strategy?
Yeah, it's changed for us quite a bit over the years. The first game we ever launched was a premium title, so we made all of our money off of the download. Our second title that we ever launched was a free download with ads in it. We used some of that ad inventory to sell to external advertisers, and we used some to cross-promote that paid title that we made. Over the years, it's changed quite a bit. So 2 years ago, maybe, it was about a third, paid apps, advertising, and in-app purchases. 2 years ago, we launched a game called Dragonvale, which last year was the #1 iPad top grossing game, #4 iPhone. It's the second longest game to sit in the top grossing charts. So as you might expect, that shifted our revenue quite a bit. That game is entirely monetized through in-app purchases. So because that was such a big hit for us, our revenue shifted towards that game. We also made a strategic decision in the company to focus on using our other casual titles to cross-promote Dragonvale and other higher yield games, and also to just kind of grow our network. But that's not to say that we're opposed to external advertising. We're not at all. I think ultimately we're kind of revenue agnostic as long as it's providing a good customer experience and the right strategy for growing our company in the long run. We're open to any form of monetization. So I wouldn't be surprised if we had this conversation 2 years from now, the mix is different than it is today. But today it's heavily in-app purchase as a nature of the success of certain games.
Right.
We had Goji, obviously we only had 110 million downloads, not a lot of them on the mobile side, but as we've gone through the purchasing process, we've been 100% IAP. We've had 0 ad revenue. We do some cross promotes with a lot of our house product. But as we've gone through the model, I think one of the things as a developer you want to start looking at is if you're just a developer, that's fine, but the bigger part of this business is user acquisition and monetization of those users. What's your LTV of those users? And backing that out, unless you've raised a pile of money that you don't mind burning through. If you want to be diligent about it, look what King.com does. I mean, they can do that because they have the #1 grossing game, but the reality of it is that the value of their users is greater to them not monetizing and hopefully soon to monetize using different updates and features than it is to give them to someone else. So, I know when you're struggling and you have a poor game, ads are very attractive. We're not looking at ads. I think it's certainly something we don't ignore. But as a business, if you're spending too much to acquire users, you can either try to do a better job of acquiring them cheaper or monetize them better. If you're just throwing ads on it, I just think It's a Band-Aid approach to a long-term strategy that really should be more about building and designing better games in this free-to-play space. You have the opportunity to not ship it and forget it. You can improve, constantly be diligent about doing a better job of monetizing the customer base that you've attracted. So one of the things that we've decided was, let's just focus on IAP. If we are that bad at doing it, we should be out of the business anyway, but if we're not, then ads is as an option. And for our strategy short term is potentially look at video ads only, strategically, not just throw ads at the people that after one day don't convert.
At Z2, we generally start with the customer and work backwards and think about, what they're expecting, how they're going to play the game. Generally, we lean toward solving our problems within that purchase as well. But there are times where we feel comfortable that an ad solution is the right solution. It's generally not often in our games, but it has been in the past.
So that brings up a good point. So at what point, if you're giving some developers in the audience, some recommendations, at what point in the development cycle would you recommend start thinking about that monetization strategy? So, you're developing an app, you're thinking about everything that's involved in developing this application. At what point do you start integrating that monetization or making sure you have some sort of monetization strategy?
One of the things that, as an owner, I don't want to sound like I'm sitting in a giant chair at the top of a pyramid. I try to integrate with my team as much as possible. And one of the things I start looking at is the moment I start walking around my game development studio with about 50 people in it, and 40 of them are playing Clans, and the other ones are playing Dragonvale. And I'm asking myself, how come they're not playing our game? If they're not designing a game that they want to play,
right.
Not to say that they're the perfect customer, I start looking at my competitors' games and the monetization tactics and techniques they're using, and how do I quickly employ those tactics and designs into our methodology so that we can grow with the business rather than watch it grow past us.
I think in our case it starts with a fun game. So often our games in early stages of development will focus on just the fun. So finding kind of a core mechanic, like a fun jump mechanic, let's say, in a casual runner or something. We focus on that stuff first, but that's not to say that you want to bolt on monetization at the end. There have been some cases where we did that accidentally, and I'd say that rarely works. Like trying to apply monetization in the last month of development, it's not going to work well because it is just kind of slapped on. So I don't know, it's a silly answer, but I'd say somewhere in between. I think it's good to start just focusing on a fun game, making sure that you're building something that's engaging and entertaining, but you don't want to lose sight of monetization if that is a goal of yours, if you want to actually make it into a business.
Right.
Yeah, I think I agree. If you are not making a fun game, then nobody's gonna spend a lot of money in it anyways. And I think we look at it. There's different people thinking about different ways, right? Like the finance and business people are thinking, how do we make money out of this? The game designers are thinking, how to make this more fun? And we all try to come to an agreement of a combination of everything. But when the focus that we give to our games is on the engagement levels and retention levels, because we know that if we have a game that's fun, where we can get people to really be engaged and stay and come back and play the game every day, we're going to find a way to monetize that user, whether it's going to be them spending money in the game eventually, or it's going to be us finding a creative way of monetizing them through advertising. And the way that we've done it, and this is something that my first game that I worked with about 5 years ago was a Facebook game. What was my first game? Sorry, but it was my first social Facebook game. And it was a game called Bola. It was a soccer game. And we didn't know anything about in-app purchases. So what we did was, because it was a soccer game and it was right before the World Cup, we went and tried to get sponsors to do it. And this was a studio that we were good at creating games, but we didn't knew not a lot about free-to-play or monetization. So we did the sponsor integrations, thinking how we make the game better. So with soccer, it was easy to integrate sponsors, and we did it that way. And ever since, every time I've try to find either a direct relationship or try to figure out an ad product, I thought about how do I integrate this in a way that it's a complement for the game and that actually can make it better instead of being an interruption or something that people are going to hate it for. So some in our games right now we have videos and we have other things that are sometimes interesting, sometimes they're annoying. It depends on what video it is and how can you target that. But it really depends. But we also have things, for instance, on like mini golf matchup. There's tournaments, so people play tournaments. You can play against your friends. So we can have sponsored tournaments, and that's something that creates huge engagement. The brands love it. It's something super targeted, and the users like it because they want to win the Coca-Cola tournament instead of just winning some random tournament. So, and then eventually, there can be prizes and things associated with that as well. So I think that there's ways of thinking, and that's something that we thought about when we started thinking about tournaments. So if you think about it in a way that benefits gameplay, you can start thinking about it from the beginning. But if you don't focus on making a fun and engaging game, there's just not going to be a way to monetize those users anyway. And I would say that if you wait too long and you make a fun game, but then you don't have any idea of how you monetize it, you're not just scaring people away by just adding sort of like last minute things that make the user experience worse. So, yeah.
Perfect. So along those same lines, we talked about, you guys mentioned user experience quite a bit. So how do you evaluate user experience prior to launch? So you have this game and you're trying to figure out kind of what the user experience would be. Is it based on past games that you've developed, or do you make changes as you go? So how much, and kind of leading up to that is how much attention do you pay to user feedback?
Well, one of the biggest things that we obviously publish, so as we're getting pitches from developers, the first question I ask them is who's their customer? And when they answer everyone, I just turn away and walk. Because if you can't build a game that's targeted to a certain customer base, you can't target the way that they're going to buy and purchase. Monetization is great, but if you think everyone buys and plays the same way, the guys on the panel would say that's not true. That's why there's giant teams that monitor analytics. So one of the first things you need to do is make sure you know who your customer is and think about what the market does. When I get into the games business, I never thought merchandising was an important part of games business, and now merchandising is very important. We make small changes to our storefront, the way we present or feature a certain aspect of our store or in-app purchase. It significantly changed our business. We put a $20 package as a top seller, and overnight that package went from 1.8% of our purchases to 9.6% of our purchases. That's merchandising. It had nothing to do with the game. So you have to think about who your customer is, how do you attract them, and then start being strategic about the way you do everything in the process, not just the game.
I'll actually add to that. The transparency of monetization in the game that you're building really can build trust with players, or you can make them very cautious about investing. We actually build games and want our players to buy into the world that we're creating, and once they buy into the world, they'll actually spend on the game and invest in the game. And a lot of that comes with clear transparency on how you play and how you monetize and what you get for it. The best counter example is when you encounter a paywall. You don't know if you're going to have 3 more and if the price is going to go up by double, and you just don't want to commit to that game because you just don't know how the developer is going to come back and kind of tax the experience. And once you do that, you lose their trust. And I think that's the kind of thought process you need to go through.
Yeah, something I'd add. We, over the last year or two, have focused more attention on testing before launch. So I think this is especially true in the mobile world, but it's also probably true in all forms of games. Like your early success is very important. Some games just kind of spike and then tail off in terms of popularity. So getting it right, or as right as you can at launch, is really important. So We do a lot of things to test early on. So initially, when the game's very, very early in development, the small team of people that are working on the game are prototyping different versions of it, trying different ideas and concepts in a really rough way. Once the game's further along, we do full company play tests. So everyone in the company sits down for lunch. We buy everyone lunch. They all play the game for an hour or two. We all give feedback on what we like and don't like about the game. As we get even further, we bring in regular people into our office and have them play. We use usertesting.com as like an online version of that, where you can kind of watch people around the world playing your game and videotaping their experience. I'd recommend doing a lot of that stuff in addition to, I totally agree that optimizing and testing in a real world environment is important, but also getting it right on day one is really important.
Have you guys ever been in a situation where you made specific changes based on user feedback?
I hope so.
So we operate very similar to how Joe just said. I mean, we do a lot of, our products go through several stages of testing, and we have the entire company is sort of like forced to be testing constantly. Every time we have sort of like a new release or a new feature or something we're working on, everybody has to test pretty much every day and give feedback. We also do like late night testing parties and stuff like that, where we find ways of motivating people, prices and things to get people to stay late and do that or do it from home. But we also sometimes do releases in other countries before we do a global release, and we'll test with small markets that have similar demographics from the US maybe, or places where we think that we can get really good feedback, and we do take a lot of that feedback into account, and we've been successful with all our launches. We've had sort of like 100% hit rate because we've been, it hasn't been so much about like launching it fast, but launching it when it's right and when we feel it's ready. So right now, we launched mini golf about 3.5 months ago, and we get people asking us our next game, and we have a lot of things that we're doing, but we've been testing and we haven't felt that we're ready, so we haven't launched. So it's really important to get it right and get as much feedback and commit to making the changes based on that feedback. You can't just ignore it and say we're going to launch it anyways.
Sure.
Yeah.
What about, so let's switch gears a little bit. So what about particular countries or regions? Do you find particular countries monetize better than others? Do you focus on specific countries and give me some feedback as to what you see results-wise from different countries or regions?
At Z2, we actually focus quite a bit on international. So we do localization for all of our games in Chinese, Japanese, French, German, Spanish. We cover Portuguese, Russian, and Korean. And we find that we were in a position actually when we launched Battle Nations, one of our earlier titles, to see meaningful impact when we began localizing the game. And we would see 200 to 300% increases in daily average revenue per user. So a really nice return on investment. It's a very story-driven game, so we really had to recruit the right kind of folks to do true localization. They were editors, not strictly translators. And that was kind of a big boon for us. And in the process, we saw, great monetization in Japan, one of our best countries. It's been a big learning because that is probably one of the hardest places to, catch hold.
We just recently launched Archie Comics, Archie game, about a month and a half ago, and they gave us a list of the territories that they were most successful in for their comic book. Problem is that they're English only. So when we started looking at localization, we've got about 65,000 lines as text to localize, so that's about $75,000 a language. So we decided not to localize and just try English. And ironically, what we found was in Asia, the game did very well initially because a lot of people in Singapore, Hong Kong, China, India used Archie comic books to learn English. So they all picked up the game. The game did very well in the charts right away, but they were long-term monetizing customers, where in North America we saw very quick monetizing. We had multiple, actually over 75% of our customers who purchase 3 times in the first 24 hours. We've got some customers that have purchased over 50 times in the first week. So it was a big surprise for us to kind of anticipate that. But watching these guys who build games that have had a lot of success, you can never underestimate how much money someone will spend. I've known other developers that have got customers that are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in their virtual currency that means nothing in real life.
Cool. We'll do one last question, then we'll open it up for some questions from the group. So let's say you're a developer currently monetizing an app, but due to, I'm sure a lot of people have limited time and resources to build out a kind of a robust monetization strategy. If you could dedicate a couple hours a week, what would be your focus? From looking at it from a monetization, what would be some advice or recommendations you would give to a smaller group of developers, maybe a 1 or 2 team shop?
Yeah, I think most of the things that large-scale developers do, small-scale developers could do on a smaller scale. The first thing I'd say is, I think it's important to design an innovative, new kind of game experience. I don't think you necessarily have to innovate early on when it comes to monetization. In fact, I think if you introduce a totally new form of monetization, it might take consumers a while to kind of get used to it. So I would first say kind of look to games in your category, see how they're monetizing. If most of them are doing it with ads, maybe you want to go with an ad strategy. If most of them are doing it with in-app purchase, maybe follow that. Look at their pricing, look at kind of what customers expect in terms of prices. When it comes to testing,
Right.
There's low-cost ways of everything we just described. Bring in your friends and buy them pizza and have them play the game. When it comes to analytics, there's free solutions out there. But I'd say focus on kind of the basics instead of trying to reinvent the wheel, because often I think when you're at a large scale, you're optimizing, in examples we're giving, you're optimizing for that extra 20%,
right.
but the 80% is usually not rocket science. It's tap into an ad network, whatever is sort of simple to get started with.
Yeah. I also, again, am going to reiterate, know who your customer is when you're building your game. I'm telling you, you'll be surprised. I've met a number of people, and they come up to me and they're like, I never saw this game in the store, so I built a game that I want to play. And I was like, perfect. You are the only customer you're going to have. Don't build a game for you. Know who your customer is and build a game for them. And as Joe mentioned, innovation is fantastic. When you're Apple and Google, it's fun when you got a few billion to play with. Evolving a mechanic, just as good. If I had someone present to me an evolutionized type of Clash of Clans or Candy Crush game, I would just be as excited as you bringing me some next generation monetization trigger.
And I would be careful about that. I actually would say that you should find a white space and keep in mind that people have been playing Clash of Clans for 9 months now. And if you remind them of that game, they may say 3 days in, after they have given you some time and maybe some money, they may say, I'm not so excited about this new game. It looks a little bit different, but after a few days in, it reminds me of all that time and money I spent on Clash, and I just can't wait to delete it from my phone. I would also say that analytics, not the collecting of data, but the true analysis of what the heck is going on with your game, that's underappreciated. And I don't mean that from strictly from a merchandising perspective, and that's valuable, but also why are people engaging, when are they disengaging, what parts of the balance of the game really aren't working. You find some really surprising things if you dig into the numbers and kind of look at how players are consuming your game in a kind of holistic way.
Cool. So we can open up to.
Yeah.
Cool.
We're technically over, so.
Okay.
However, if there's Somebody, hello? Yes. So if you have a question, please raise your hand and I'll bring the mic to you.
When you're planning on monetization, how much do you put into just planning what are the points where you know people, like this is where they're likely to need more coins or X, Y, and Z, versus how much do you really like have Excel-based statistical models of we know these users are going to be converting on this level and we've mapped out exactly what we plan on making? What's the depth when you're in development to try and figure those out?
I think it's a fair amount. So our game designers, but I guess it depends on the game. So if your game has a fairly complex economy, even as you're developing it, you have to have spreadsheets in order to make sure you're not going to like flood the game with too much currency and stuff like that. If it's a more simple game with, you know, maybe just one in-app purchase, or maybe it's just ad-based, I don't think the spreadsheets and the data come into play as much until the game's actually live and you're collecting that analytic data and, you know, analyzing and figuring out where you can tune it and, you know, optimize the game. But yeah, I mean, I think you can make a successful game without like obsessing about the metrics, but I think I do agree, like analytics are underappreciated in general. So, you know, if that's something that interests you, like, I definitely think it's worth taking a look at.
I think the important thing from a free-to-play standpoint, the difference is that when you were making a game before and you were just shipping it and selling it, I mean, it didn't really matter, right? But now it's all about, you know, people are downloading the game for free. There's millions of options out there. You need to find a way for them to like the game and keep them engaged and keep them coming back. And, you know, making money, it's even like an afterthought to like, how do I make a product people want to play? Because at least then you learn and then you can make another one and make monetization better. But the analytics and at least having visibility to what's happening in your game after you launch it, that's probably the most important thing, because, you know, launching it is just the first step, and then you need to keep shipping updates and keep improving the game and keep figuring out what people are doing and how you can improve those metrics. So you need to have the ability to collect that data, and you need to understand how to analyze it in a way that you can actually take that into like a feedback into consideration and improve the game as you go.
This is a question for everybody, but I'm particularly interested probably in Dragonville's answer. Your successes, do you find that you have do you care more about, or find yourself caring more about organic growth versus the value of your monetization with the players that you have when it comes to, like, I guess, becoming number one? And how do you value players that spread organically or but never monetize? How do you weigh it?
We value both at a high level. The majority of people in Dragonville have never spent a dime on the game. We're happy with that. We're totally fine with it because they're telling their friends, they're driving the game up the charts, which exposes it to more people. That's the freemium model. But, you know, we are trying to make a business also, so we look at how the game can be better monetized while not like sacrificing the experience for those people that don't want to pay. Dragonville, I think, is not unique, but somewhat unique in the top grossing kind of set of games, in that literally every single thing in the game you can do for free. There's nothing, literally zero in the game that you have to pay for in order to get some advantage or unlock some character or something like that. And that's a fundamental like kind of belief of our company with the game. So, you know, we make it 100% of the experience is available for people that don't want to pay. The people that do pay are happy to pay us. Like, they tell us they're, you know, they really coveted that rare dragon. They don't want to take a couple weeks to try to breed it organically for free. They're happy to pay $1 to get it sooner. So we make the design, we design the game in a way that it works for both those audiences.
Hi, I'm curious to hear if you can share any interest on the growing alternative payments specific to mobile.
Sorry, what was
I'm sorry?
I'm curious to hear if your users are requesting alternative payments as part of your monetization plans, specific on the mobile platform.
I don't know.
No.
I guess- I think people like the convenience of being able to pay easily when they want to buy something. You know, one-click payment through iOS or Android. I think people like that model. I don't think we've heard too much requests in terms of all.
There's interest in alternative payments in China, but otherwise, no.
I think potentially for business reasons, there's, you know, as other like device platforms emerge, not having to pay a premium to the platform owner or paying a lower premium, that's interesting for the business owner. But I think consumers are pretty happy with the experience. If anything, I think they want it even more fluid and simple. Like on some older Android devices, it's been kind of hard to
Right.
buy things. But I don't think it's a matter of like wanting alternative forms of like credit card payments and things like that.
Great. So thank you guys. Thanks for your input. And